You've been having the time of your life in Thailand, zipping through the neon-lit streets of Bangkok and tuk-tuks and enjoying the craziest nightlife you've ever seen. You've swum in the crystal-clear azure waters next to crab-eating macaws, partied on the beach until sunrise with people from all over the globe. You've ridden a scooter through verdant mountains in the north until you found friendly small towns where dreadlocked Thais entertain hordes of youngsters who, like you, have escaped their humdrum existence back home. You never want this trip to end. But that cash you saved working nights at the Amazon warehouse is running out. One more night in Chiang Mai and then to Bangkok and then home. How terribly depressing. But that night, you met a man in a dimly lit joint called Lucky Bar. You tell him your story and he says, "I know how you can make some cash." The scenario we've just depicted has happened before, and as you've probably guessed, the fast cash that's offered will mean you become a courier. But not the kind of courier job you might see on Indeed.com. You will be what's sometimes called a mule, a drug mule, and that involves taking drugs from one country to another and receiving a few $1,000s for the trip. If you go to any main airport in Thailand, you'll find bookshops stacked with true stories about people who have been arrested after doing this job. Like you, they only wanted to stay a while more in Thailand. The country is a hub for drug trafficking. These days, drugs such as methamphetamine are made in super labs in Myanmar and then taken by local mules into northern Thailand. Someone then has to get the drugs out of the country. In the days when the so-called Golden Triangle was the epicenter of opium production, the main drug that traveled from Thailand to all over the world was heroin. So that's a major reason a lot of foreigners have ended up serving serious time in Thai prisons. Some for trafficking huge amounts, some for just dealing in resort towns renowned for their frantic and sometimes sleazy nightlife, such as Phuket or Pattaya. But when it comes to being locked up abroad, Thailand wins easily for the most books written about that experience. Then there's the corruption. We'll tell you the true story of an Iranian-Swedish man named Benny Moafi who traveled from Sweden and opened a restaurant and pub in Phuket on the beautiful Andaman coast of Thailand. His story will shock you because any law-abiding citizen could have found himself in his shoes. Expatriates and Thais who live in Phuket know that if you own a place that's part of the nightlife, then you'll likely have to pay the police some cash each month. This is just a tax, like a mafia tax. In Thailand, they might call it T-money. It amounts to millions in bribes. Benny didn't want to pay. Why should he? He ran a legitimate business. It's a long story, but he was set up for a crime he didn't commit and ended up spending almost 10 years in Thai prisons. We'll tell you the good news first. During his incarceration, he learned to read and write Thai. He then got a Thai law degree. Once he understood the law, he started suing the prisons he was in for certain flagrant abuses of prisoners' rights. Even better, he took everyone involved in the crime against him down over a number of years. Benny filed 207 legal cases and over 1,200 complaints against lawyers, the Royal Thai Police, and the Department of Corrections, and many of those corrupt people were convicted of crimes. By the way, when the cops had him at the station prior to his incarceration, they said, "Pay us 400,000 baht and we'll let you go." With no evidence against him except a photocopy of a gun, yes, not a real gun, it was never seen, and a very sketchy witness who was working with the cops, Benny thought he would win his case. He was wrong, but he spent months in a dirty jail and lost a lot of weight. He then decided to pay the 400,000. This is what he said about that. "I was sick in jail and I lost 20 kilos in weight. I decided I'd pay the money. I gave a lawyer my money, but he stole it. He took my car too. I later sued him and got him disbarred." He said police and lawyers took his house, his cars, his gold, everything he owned. During his time in prison, he had 17 lawyers, and he said all of them took his money but did nothing to help him. Only one lawyer helped him out in the end. That's 1 out of 18 lawyers that wasn't corrupt. Being incarcerated is bad enough, but imagine being sent down as an innocent man. Imagine if they told you that you could pay your way out. Imagine there are no lawyers that aren't corrupt. This is only one reason why you don't want to end up on the wrong side of the Thai cops. Benny was even convicted for not having a license for the photocopy of the gun. This is crime land at its worst. But how about prison itself? Benny said he was tortured many times. He had some of his teeth kicked out and received stitches on many occasions. He's an exceptional case though because he annoyed the wardens by suing the prisons all the time. Something like a banana in a Thai prison is 3 times more expensive than on the outside. So Benny sued one prison for that and won. Men wear shackles at times, and Benny thought that breached certain laws pertaining to human rights. He sued again. One warden even announced to all the imprisoned men that if Benny were to be killed, no one would be prosecuted. But no one killed him because he was beating the system. The prisoners liked him for that. He even sued one prison for not having TVs, and the place soon got them. He found a legal loophole in correctional law and then he used it. that didn't make him popular with the warden. As for the conditions, in some of those prison books, men talk about having to drink dirty river water. And we can tell you that if you're in one of Bangkok's prisons, the Chao Phraya River is not exactly clean. The food is so bad it's barely edible. So what all this means is people can sell prisoners food and clean water but with a markup. Guards are paid little, so for them, the exploitation of prisoners is a second income. This is what Benny said about that. They made the food so disgusting that it couldn't be eaten. So then the guards could sell the uneaten food as pig feed. Everything is for sale inside. It's not the Department of Corrections, but the Department of Corruption. Okay, that's just Benny's story. There are many, many more tales of horror. And we should say that there are more stories of Westerners being conned out of money and either ending up dead or in prison. This is how an Irishman named Colin Martin described his police interrogation. They threatened to kill me if I didn't confess, and at one time held a gun to my head and told me they would shoot me if I didn't sign a statement they had prepared in Thai. Then, they would say I was shot while trying to escape. His book was called Welcome to Hell. Let's give you more examples. You've been arrested and you don't really know what's going on. No one speaks English and you are being told to sign papers. Plenty of people have signed something that was a confession and they didn't even know it. You get sent to prison and taken to a cell. You are in welded shackles that will stay on until you are sentenced. This might take months or years, and in court, you might have no idea what's going on anyway if you don't speak Thai or have a translator. Some inmates are shackled until their sentence ends, and there are numerous cases of the metal causing cuts leading to dangerous infections. Some prisoners say just the sound of shackles is disturbing, as it sounds like slaves in ancient Rome. Let's say you're gonna stay at perhaps Thailand's most notorious prison, Bang Kwang, aka the Bangkok Hilton. The Thais sometimes call it the Big Tiger because some of those that go in don't come out. This is no exaggeration. If you don't have money being sent in, then you don't have access to essential nutritious food. On your first night, you might sleep in a cell with 60 men or more. You're packed together like fish in a tin. It's so hot your skin itches, the mosquitoes are all over you. You have diarrhea because having no cash in your hand, you had to eat that fish head soup. Now imagine stepping over all those men to the one toilet in the corner, and you're in shackles. Hit someone, annoy them, make a loud noise as you excrete water into that hole in the ground, and you might just get a beating. Many foreigners have written that on their first night they wanted to take their own life. Now imagine this, you wake up and the guy next to you is dead. Is that a big deal? According to many people who've done hard time in the Big Tiger, no, it isn't. Read the books of the rather posh British man David Macmillan, a man that became an international drug smuggler, and he will tell you death stinks up Thai prisons a lot. He said some people just can't take it, but try and escape and get caught, and the result will be having your legs smashed with bats. You'll never walk right again. Is this legal? Hell no, but it goes on. By the way, Macmillan holds a record in that he's the only man ever to escape from Bangkok's notorious Klong Prem prison. He was well aware that if caught, he might have an accident and become disabled for life. Getting beaten by prison trustees isn't just a slap around the face. Some books detail how trustees would sometimes beat a man to death for everyone to see. That's how they kept the place controlled. You can find recent reports of prisoners dying after being disciplined. In 2018, a Thai woman made a complaint after her husband died at the hands of guards. She demanded to see his body, and then said, "I was shocked when I saw his body." My question is, how could prison guards do this to prisoners? Human Rights Watch said the barbaric practice of severe beatings leads to the death of prisoners way too often, and the Thai authorities just look the other way. Another punishment was being forced to stand all day in a large sewage tank, so basically up to your neck in hot feces all day. We should say that this particularly terrible punishment has not been reported for many years. So it's not surprising many prisoners turn to heroin, and guess who brings that in? The guards, of course. The confiscated heroin that the men are in for ends up back in the prison for quadruple its street value. Like the USA, Thailand's prisons are mostly filled with men on drug charges. It's said to be about 70% of prisoners in Thailand. It can be small amounts, too. One young first offender in Chiang Mai served 4 years for 5 pills of Yapar. In Thailand, that translates to crazy medicine. It's methamphetamine. HIV is rife in the system because so many men share needles. One prisoner said the prison hospital is the worst place there. He said those who go there often don't come back. What about a typical day when no one is being beat up? You know, just a normal day. Well, you wake up at 6 a.m. and go to the trough with the other men where you use a bowl to pour water over yourself. A disgusting breakfast is served and anyone with money in their account won't eat it. Many men in there are poor and have no cash. Thai prisons are filled with African drug mules who have no contact back home and also with hill tribe members that have no access to money. In some prisons, there are paid jobs though. Anyway, you eat, and after that you stand and sing Thailand's national anthem. Westerners with money don't work and have said that they paid for a less packed cell and paid poorer folks to do the work for them, such as cleaning clothes or cooking food. With cash, you can buy food stuff, but it's limited. Westerners will often try and live together, so like US prisons, there's some segregation of ethnicity. On the good side, Thai prisons don't have gang violence that could be compared to the US, but make no mistake, there are murderous Thai gangsters in prison that will kill you over a cigarette. Billy Moore, who wrote the book that got turned into a movie called A Prayer Before Dawn, said on his first night in a Chiang Mai prison, an inmate died in his cell. He said in 1 week, he saw 25 men get carried out of the prison. He said in an interview, "I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Murder, rape, corruption, and the inhumane degradation. You couldn't even invent or conjure up the things I saw." It sounds unbelievable, but just in 2019, an American man went into a Thai immigration jail. You know, the place you might end up for overstaying a visa, and he wound up dead. A British man who shared the same cell said the American had been bullied by other men and beaten daily. He was no snitch or a gang member, and the British said the gang didn't like the fact that he was American. There was another case recently of a British man who went to an immigration jail and described it as a prisoner of war camp. He was in working without the correct visa. He said he saw daily beatings and the guards would just watch it as it happened. He said about the guards, if you didn't understand what they were saying, which most people don't, they just beat you up. And some of the guys were stuck in there for years because they had no way of paying for a flight out of Thailand. The sentences are what you call quite harsh too. And it's well known that people can just do a few years for a single murder in Thailand and a lifetime for a possession of drugs. A British man not long ago got 50 years for having 200 ecstasy pills. In 2019, a Thai killer of 5 women dubbed Thailand's Jack the Ripper was released after 14 years and then killed again right after getting out. But imagine being innocent and all this happening to you. Imagine if the cops set you up and the courts didn't help. This is what Benny Moafi said about his feelings after being released after 9 years and 8 months. "I'm angry inside. You know that if I'd paid them money, I wouldn't have spent a day in jail. The corrupt policeman called me ki niu, or stingy, for not paying the bribe." Benny remained in Thailand and started a new law practice to help foreigners who found themselves in trouble. His story about learning law and going after every corrupt official and lawyer who did him wrong gained him a lot of respect from many Thai people, who themselves are only too aware of the injustice system in their country. To make matters even worse, when Thai and foreign activists and journalists have written about corruption, they've been sued for defamation and have faced prison time. Sleeping with 60 men and eating pig food makes doing time a lot harder when you're innocent. You might wonder if American prisons with their gangs and violence and bullying are better than Thai prisons. Watch these episodes now and then decide how to survive inside prison, and this man spent 43 years in isolation. How long until a person goes crazy?